Former U.S. President Donald Trump won the New Hampshire Republican primary on Tuesday, further cementing his position as the frontrunner in the party's presidential nomination. Now, that brings him closer to a rematch with incumbent President Joe Biden. For more, we're joined by our foreign affairs correspondent, Bae Eun-ji. Welcome back, Eun-ji.
Thanks for having me.
So, Eun-ji, let's talk about the New Hampshire primary election back on Tuesday. Why is it so important?
Well, to give you a brief explanation, primaries and caucuses are the methods that are used in the U.S. to select candidates for political parties before the actual presidential election in November. Primary voters choose their preferred candidate by casting ballots anonymously, whereas caucuses are meetings run by political parties that are held at the county or district level. The outcomes of these contests are taken into account to award delegates to the winners. Candidates must reach a certain number of delegates to win the nomination and appear on the general election ballot in November. The New Hampshire primary that was held on Tuesday was the first in a series of primary elections and the second presidential nominating contest following the Iowa caucus last week. Results of the contest in Iowa and New Hampshire are seen as having a big influence on media coverage and public perception. They do not guarantee the winner of the party's nomination, but it does give the candidate early momentum. In fact, after Trump's decisive win in the Iowa caucus, biotech company founder Vivek Ramaswamy dropped out of the race for the Republican presidential nomination. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis also suspended his bid just before the New Hampshire primary.
So that leaves Trump with just one opponent. I know Republican primary election has just begun, but it seems very likely that Trump's name will make it on the ballot in November, right?
That's right. As you mentioned earlier, the former president defeated his last remaining Republican opponent, Nikki Haley, in the New Hampshire primary this week. For Trump, this was a huge step toward winning a third consecutive Republican nomination for the presidential election.
And just a little note to Nikki, she's not going to win. She's not going to win.
Tuesday's outcome follows his landslide victory in the Iowa caucus last week, making him the first non-incumbent Republican to win both states. Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor, congratulated Trump, but refused to drop out, claiming the contest is far from over, with many states left to cast their votes.
New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. And the next one is my sweet state of South Carolina.
But despite her efforts, Haley now faces growing pressure from Republicans to drop out of the race.
Well, Eun-ji, I have to point out, incumbent President Joe Biden also won the Republican primary in New Hampshire this week. This means a rematch between him and Trump is also very highly likely.
That's right. Joe Biden won through an unusual write-in effort in New Hampshire's Democratic primary election. Despite his name not even being on the ballot, Biden easily defeated his two top rivals. This comes after months of heated disagreement between New Hampshire Democrats and the National Party over the primary calendar. The Democratic National Committee decided to change the rules by making South Carolina the first nominating contest of the year, which goes against a century-old tradition of New Hampshire hosting the first primary. Outraged over the decision, the state of New Hampshire decided to schedule its primary ahead of South Carolina's anyway, in accordance with their own laws. This resulted in Biden loyalists unofficially writing his name on the ballot, as he was not among the candidates listed. With Trump increasingly likely to be the Republican nominee for the White House race in November, Tuesday's victory brings him closer to a rematch with incumbent President Joe Biden.
Well, Eun-ji, I have to point out we still have 10 months until the presidential election in November. What's next? I mean, when's the next Republican nomination race?
Well, Nevada and the Virgin Islands are up next on the calendar. But the major battle will be on February 24th in South Carolina, where Haley served as a governor. From then on, a series of primaries and caucuses nationwide will lead up to the Republican National Convention in July, when the party's delegates will officially select their nominee.
Well, I guess we'll have to keep an eye on how the results in South Carolina will turn out next month.
Right. If Trump wins again in South Carolina, a rematch between Trump and Biden will be inevitable.
All right. Thank you, Eun-ji, for the wrap-up today.
My pleasure.